Hello and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance, where I am your host, Alacias and Duncan.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. Welcome.
What are we going to be talking about?
Today, on today's show, we're going to be talking. I'm going to do a little bit about business, but we're going to also follow up on this thing we talked about last time with work. And then I also want to kind of cover up the student loan stuff because there's been some events that have happened with that, for those of you who don't know. But the first thing I kind of want to talk to you guys about. So in business, because hang on. There we go. We sort of talked about it last time. The big thing that screws up most businesses is just bad management. I mean, as somebody who, went to business school in finance, I've read 1,000 of these journals and, essays about it. But the bottom line is whenever you're going into to do an analysis or business analysis, and I do this for professionally, you can pretty much, before you walk in the door, the problem is management. I mean, it always is. I mean, it always starts at the top. So I'm going to teach you guys a basic concept. There are basically a couple different types of leaders. And the main three, hang on. Sorry, everybody, for the little blip there. We had a technical problem. So there are generally three types of leaders that we talk about in business. I mean, there's lots of different types, but there's three main categories. One is laissez-faire, which means basically they don't really do anything. They're just kind of, they just kind of hang out, and that's about it. They just sort of expect their employees to handle it. So a great example of this is like if you go to a convenience store, a lot of times the owners, they'll go in, they'll check the books, but other than that, they expect the clerks to just take care of everything, right? Do you agree, or am I? Yeah. Okay. So that would be one. You typically, I mean, depending on the business, you don't generally want to do that, right? The other type is a transactional leader. Okay. And a transactional leader would be somebody who is more autocratic in the way they do things. They're very, micromanaging or whatnot, but they want to get certain jobs done. Now, that works well for short-term or contract employees, right? Because the idea is there's always a carrot and a stick. I'll give you the money to do the job, but if you screw it up and I'll fire you, sue you, whatever, right? So there's always a risk, there's always a reward and punishment kind of thing on the table. And that's how you get your employees to do things. But, it doesn't really inspire your employees to go above and beyond if that's all there is. They just want to meet the goal and get it done. And that's okay in the short run for the most part. In the long run, what you're talking about is what we like to call transformational leadership. Now, transformational leadership are people that they generally try to develop a vision and they try to inspire their employees, right, or their workers to co-opt into the vision and build it and create it, right? But part of that is you got to really pay attention to your employees. You have to pay them well. You have to make sure their needs are met. If your employee comes to you and says, hey, I have such and such problem, I got to go, you can't be a punk about it. You got to be like, all right, that's fine. Right? So you have to pay attention to their personal needs, get them involved and make them feel like they're contributing. And then you got to let them sometimes take the wheel. Right. But that's how you get better results in general. Right. And I can just tell you, in general, sometimes you just let the other person take it. And then a minute later, you realize, oh, they had a better idea than I did. Aren't I glad I did this? Right. It happens. You can't be right all the time. So this is just sort of a kind of little characteristics that in business school when they teach it, it's just general characteristics. I took this from Cavendish Wood. So they generally tend to inspirational motivation. They're trying to inspire you towards the goal. We're creating this or that. They want to make you feel a part of the business. And part of making them feel a part of the business is making sure that the success of the business, kind of trickles down to them, right? Some of the gravy spills onto their potatoes. You know what I'm saying? Individual consideration. Once again, you got to think about their lives because their relationships and their personal lives are more important than their jobs, and you have to realize that. Idealized influence, just that's just, you just influence them by your passion for what you're doing, right? Intellectual stimulation, make sure that they're contributing, they feel like they're contributing, and they have the ability to contribute. And then just little things like characteristics of things, self-management, not being too egotistical, appropriate risk taking. You don't want to take too much risk because you're going to make people uncomfortable. Decision making, blah, blah, blah. Adaptability is a big one. Being able to change with the circumstance. So those are typically good things. If you're a manager or you're running a business, those are good qualities. Generally, you kind of want to focus on, because you generally get better results over the long run, right? Most people tend to be more transactional. It's the you're fired if you don't do it kind of mentality, right? Or I'm a punk, about if you don't do what I say, you're going to get canned, or I'm going to pay you less, or whatever. The Dave Ramsey method of business management, which is probably why he has fairly high turnover and he gets sued by everybody, right? But I want to start with this. So now that we've kind of covered that, this kind of dovetails into what we wanted to talk about the relationship between that and education and work. So I gave you an academic theory that actually applies in the business world. So I'll just jump here. This will be a good way to clip. So I'm going to talk to you. So now that we've kind of talked about sort of an academic theory that applies directly to the business world, and believe you me, most of these journals are funded by businesses who want to figure out how to manage and run their business better. I want to cover this. So this is Fox Business. We got Stuart Varney, the Varnicle, who's just not a great guy. You remember Stuart Varney, Lace? I think I got to take this off for a second. So Stuart Varney hosts a show on Fox. I forget what it's called. Every time I think about Stuart Varney's, the first time I saw him was years and years and years ago, and it was Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. And Stuart Varney had this whole article about we have to cut all welfare because poor people actually aren't poor because they own refrigerators. That was his whole argument.
That's a hell of a theory you've got going there, buddy.
Well, how can you be poor if you have a fridge?
Like, that's the marker?
Yeah, and then Jon Stewart's whole response was, he's right. Those food chillin' motherfuckers. So every time I see Stuart Varney, I think about that.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So he's talking to Mike Rowe, and Mike Rowe's mom. So I feel bad about kind of doing this with Mike Rowe's mom in the room, but it has to be done. And they're going to talk about, there we go. Sorry. God, we're having technical problems today. They're talking about Jamie Dimon was asked something, and I'm going to tell you what he actually said. That they do quote part of it here. So let's watch this, and you tell me what you think, Lace. Is that better? Lace?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Mike Rowe and his mom, Peggy. Now, Peggy, we are going to talk about that extraordinary new book you've got, Vacuuming in the Nude. We'll get to that, I absolutely promise. But first, I want to talk to your son here, Mike Rowe. Yeah, you're right. You're on with your mom?
Yes, look, what could possibly go wrong?
Oh, easy. Let me explain this one. The CEO of JP Morgan Chase is Jamie Dimon. He believes there's some truth, that's his words, in China's claim that the US is incompetent and lazy. I'll give you a quick quote. They kind of look at America and say, you've been incompetent and lazy. There's truth to that. We've screwed up infrastructure. We've screwed up inner city schools. The bottom line here, Mike, is, do you think that Americans are lazy?
All right.
Even if I do.
So here's where I have to hold my nose and say, I hate that you have to do this. I agree with Jamie Dimon. Right? Now, but I agree with what he actually said. He said the U.S. is considered lazy by China, and that's true because we didn't pay for infrastructure. We screwed that up, and we haven't paid for our schools, or especially he was saying inner city schools, but those were examples he was giving, right? What he didn't say was individual Americans as a whole are lazy.
Right. I was going to say I wasn't hearing what felt like an individual sort of attack yet. This was sort of like broad generalization.
Well, he was talking about the government. He wasn't talking about the American workforce. He said the Chinese think the U.S. is incompetent and lazy, not the American workforce, the U.S. government, right? And the two examples
Right. He
gives.
didn't actually say the American people. He didn't say that.
No, and the two examples he gives are examples of government things. Infrastructure and schools are government programs, right? And he was saying you effed those up. You screwed them up, essentially. And he's right, because you got to think about it too from a business perspective, because he's an actual businessman versus somebody who's a talking head on Fox, or like us, a talking head on a show. But he's got to think about things practically. I mean, as a businessman, I want good schools. Why? Because I don't want stupid employees that I have to spend a ton of money training. I pay taxes. Send me educated people, right? Don't send me idiots, right? Infrastructure, he's right. I pay taxes. I want the roads to work well. I want the internet to work well. I want my phones. I want police.
I want our kids to be able to read stuff.
Yeah, I want sewage and running water and electricity.
Sewage is great. I like sewage.
Especially
when it's not in my water.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I want food that I can eat and I know I'm not going to get diarrhea. I want clean water. I mean, this is all government stuff, right? So Jamie Dimon's got a point. We should be investing more in that kind of stuff, in the quality of life, because it helps business. And that was kind of his point. They immediately have to take it, though, because they're conservatives. No, we're talking about Americans as a whole are lazy. Because the whole narrative they have to tell all the time is there needs to be a hierarchy of people. Some people deserve more and some people deserve less, right? It's our whole joke with Worthington's Law. Worthington's Law, by the way, kids, is a made-up thing, but the theory is the more money you have, the better person you are, right? Right? But that's how they think. And that's part of what permeates the thought process in finance and is a problem. Now, Mike Rowe's been making the rounds on Fox News and other places, but Mike Rowe definitely believes that. He's going to soft soak it a little bit, but he definitely believes that here.
Oh, I don't want to hear it from China, right? No, I think Americans, like the Chinese, are human. And I think when you give humans a choice, when you give humans an easy button, they'll hit it. I will. I think we're all born with this idea that we're like rivers trying to get to the ocean. You get to a mountain and you don't go, oh, I'm going to go over that thing. You go around it. You zig and you zag. So look, when I talk a lot about this with my foundation, we offer work ethic scholarships because we believe that the fault in our stars is a certain kind of inaction. We need to be encouraged to do the hard thing, the difficult thing. We need to be suspicious of the easy thing, right? And so, that's life. We reported that since March, 400,000 people have walked away from the workforce. There are 400,000 fewer employees now than there were in March of this year. Yeah. What happened? Well, they were given an easy button, in part, right? I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but if you're able to support yourself by not working versus working, it doesn't make a lot of sense to wring your hands over the fact that a lot of people will choose not to work.
Okay, so that's a lie. That is absolutely untrue. Not necessarily a lie. He probably believes that, but it's not true. In fact, we found that when you do help people out and give them opportunity, people tend to work more. Why? Because they can get more out of it. Because they're not just doing it to just survive. They're doing it to get ahead. And when people are doing things to get ahead, they're more ambitious. And that's just
I feel like he was trying to tie two things together that are very, very different with one statement, actually. So, because there's sort of two subsets of this, right? There's exactly what you just said there, which is giving people resources, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But based on his statement, there's a different sort of subset that's not even in the same category at all, which is people who can support themselves without working, and that's kind of closer to his phrasing, although I think he's talking about the group you just mentioned.
Right.
The group that needs to utilize some resources. But there's a subset of people who perhaps are able to support themselves without work, and they really might opt not to actually work. But lumping both of these categorically under one sort of umbrella doesn't make sense. These are two distinct, different sections of people.
Right. Well, let me clarify. So what he's talking about is during COVID, people got relief checks from the government.
Right. Absolutely.
And he's saying that
way better relief checks in most other countries, by the way.
Right. And ours were not as good as most other countries. Like Spain is still giving everybody a relief check. Or Portugal and Spain, I think.
The Canadians did way better than we did too, of course.
Well, in fact, their economy did really, really well during COVID and did even better in recovery. And so I know the Portuguese have said, well, we're just going to do this universal basic income permanently. That way, if there's an emergency again, it's already in place. We don't have to freaking do anything. It's already done, right? But that's the problem. Is he's saying, look, if the government gives you money, you're not going to want to work. That's not true.
Well, let's also just stop and stomp all over what he's saying there too. I mean, first of all, he said it very poorly because he said a very broad generalization. Second of all, if you can support yourself, that is what he said. If you can support yourself without working, who on God's green earth was being able to support themselves long term on these random little kicker checks and whatever? I mean, the unemployment benefits that did happen during that time for people were much better than what they are typically.
Right.
But they even had a very a specific duration of time. So that's not something you can stay on forever, you know?
Right. Well, the other thing too is this is so, and we'll get more into this in a little bit, but a lot of it is, so you still have about 4 million people that aren't back in the workforce. The big figure on that one is you have at least 1.8 million women that left their jobs and haven't come back since COVID. All right. And I know they like to mock, don't get a degree in feminism. There's no jobs in that. There are lots of jobs in majoring in women's studies. Believe you me, businesses will pay you a lot of money to help them out to hire women. To do research, think tanks, legal firms. I mean, yeah, there's lots of jobs in that. But I was actually reading an article recently, and if I can find it, I'll link it back down here. But they were talking about this, and the woman who has a degree in economic women's studies, right, was paid a ton of money, and she figured out, well, you could probably get 1.8 million women back into the workforce shortly, but what you'd have to do is you'd have to create laws that would equal the pay gap between men and women, because that would incentivize them to come back, and you'd have to put in a little bit stricter rules and regulations about how to manage problems within the workplace, because the bottom line is you only have a handful of female CEOs, and yet women are 53 or 54% of the population. More women graduate from college now than men. It's true. 57 or 58% of college graduates are female. So it's one of those things where, we don't include women enough. We've never even had a female president. So you can't tell me that women are equal to men in this country. Just cannot make that argument.
Right?
But if you started making...
You could make it sound really ridiculous.
Right.
Really ridiculous.
Right. It reminds me of one of the few smart things I've ever heard Bill Gates say. Not to say he's not a smart guy, he is, but he was in Saudi Arabia. He was at a conference, and in Saudi Arabia, it's very segregated. So the women were roped off on one side of the room in burqas, and the men were on the other side. And the women weren't allowed to question him during the Q&A portion, the question and answer portion. And one of the guys asked him, well, what would you do if you wanted to boost up, our economy? Like if you were running our economy? And Bill Gates flat out said, well, the problem is you're not utilizing half your workforce. Half your workforce is sitting there and they're not doing anything. Not because they don't want to. Otherwise, why would they show up here? Right? Yeah, man, they want to work. That's the problem I have with this whole analysis is, in general, people want to work. This is evolutionary. Animals that don't want to work tend to die. That's just a fact. I mean, animals who don't want to go hunt or go scavenge for food or whatever tend to die. But he can't wrap his head around that. He's got to put blame on individual as opposed to looking at it systemically. But the beauty of that, and this is what I love about this sort of thought process, the Worthington's Law, wealth equals better than thought process, is if I put blame on, well, just some people are just lazy or worthless, then I don't have to do anything. Right? It's not that there's a systemic problem and we're just not educating or helping people. Right? No. If they're just lazy and worthless, then there's no expectation for us as a society, because that's just how it is. They're just lazy and worthless, so we can ignore them. That's the problem.
He's just got such like a ridiculous framing for it. I mean, it just makes me crazy. Even the way he framed it, going back to what I already said, is the literal words that came out of his mouth suggested that these resources people were given is something that can make them afford to not work. Like that this is something they could just like live off of indefinitely. Because when you say people that can afford not to work because of something, we're really talking about, you're not talking about those people. You're talking about people who have like passive income and all of that stuff. But that's not who he's actually talking about.
No.
He's talking about people who received these resources to sort of help them get through a certain time frame. But he's framed it as if it's like all some sort of thing that they could actually live off of.
Right.
You can't live off of that for more than just that finite little period of time.
Well, furthermore, he's talking about the COVID checks, which were combined were like $6 or $7 grand over a year. That was not to live off of. That was so people wouldn't die or starve. It's so they could stay home and not get COVID.
There was also the really souped up, unemployment. The unemployment was the best unemployment people have ever gotten. But again, it's for a very specific duration of time. You can't be signed up for that for your entire life or something.
And even the souped up unemployment wasn't that much money.
No, it was just significantly better than unemployment tends to be.
It was just, it was poverty wages, but it was to help people not starve and not die. And you want to talk about this? This is the problem: is you're losing the bigger portion of this, which is the reason we don't have a lot of these jobs is we're getting over the pandemic, right? A pandemic, which I want to tell you, has killed more Americans than we've lost soldiers in every war we've been in. More people died of COVID than U.S. soldiers have died in the history of this country. I mean, I don't count the Confederates because they weren't U.S. soldiers, but so if you count them, maybe it's about the same or a little more, but they weren't U.S. soldiers. They were traitors, and so who killed U.S. soldiers. So, but that's my point is they're missing the big point. And then once again, they have to spin this where Jamie Dimon didn't say that. Jamie Dimon's critique was of government policy, not taking care of the people, not taking care of infrastructure, not getting people educated. That was what he was saying. The other thing they missed, and they cut this part out of the quote, because I went and looked up what Jamie Dimon actually said. And he was talking about China, and the first thing he said was, autocratic systems work well in certain circumstances, but they don't work in the long run. Which goes back to our original point, transactional leadership, right? Is how China works. It's a carrot stick. If you don't do it, we're going to imprison you. It's an authoritarian government in China. These people don't have a choice to work. They're ordered upon pain of prison or death, right? Americans aren't. which is where Jamie Dimon finishes his point by saying, yeah, but as Americans, we have the edge. Why? Because Americans work because they want to work, because they want to get ahead, because they can. That's the edge. The edge is they're free. You're going to get better results if you encourage people and give them a chance to get ahead. That was Jamie Dimon's whole point. And they just skimmed right by it and went to, no, yeah, there's people who are lazy. And if you make it too easy on people. So what are they doing? They're making the Chinese argument. We need to be authoritarian. We need to force people, and we need to make it harder for them and not give them help and make them work during pandemics. That's kind of what he's saying. But it is what he's saying.
Just more defeating, really.
It is. It is what he's saying. But the thing about it is Micro's saying it in his very charming, charismatic micro way. He's more charismatic and charming than we are. I mean,
it's because he has such a nice voice.
I know. And he's a good-looking guy, and yeah, he's just so TV. Look how TV ready he is.
With that nice voice, you can just say anything if you have that good of a voice.
God, I know. I wish I was Barry.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I could believe almost anything James Earl Jones has to say. I mean,
yeah. Well, there are days
voices, you know.
There are times I wish I was Barry White, man. Hey, baby. Never gonna give you up.
All right. Keep your day job.
I know. Yeah, look how TV ready he is versus us.
Right?
Yeah, he's way better at the visuals than we are.
Has become the proximate cause of our unhappiness. We've been told, anyway, that if you're unhappy in your life, it's probably because you're unhappy in your work. And we're told time and time again that job satisfaction is a result of the job.
Okay, so God, I can't even...
Well, if your job sucks, you're not happy at it. And if you can't even make a living wage, you're probably not thrilled. And if you have to work 3 of them to keep the roof over your head, you're probably ticked off about it. So, I mean...
Well, and furthermore...
Just a handful of reasons, but yeah.
Well, and furthermore, okay, you got 2 employees, right? Right? They're both really good, hardworking employees. One of them is going through a divorce now. Who do you think is going to be more productive and in the moment and more, helpful and more innovative? The guy going through the divorce or the other guy? The guy going through a divorce, he's got a lot of shit on his plate, right? It's one of those things where it's like, okay, if you hate your job, right, and you're really miserable, how interested are you going to be in being innovative or productive?
You're just sort of trying to skirt through it, man.
Yeah, your motivation's going to be like, I just don't want to get freaking hassled today, man. I'm going to do the absolute minimum. Right?
The bar is set low.
Right? So it was the old joke about, it takes me 45 minutes to do my job. The boss thinks it takes me all day, so don't tell him. Right? So let's finish this up real quick because this is...
But it's really not. It's a result of the person.
Yeah, it's in your head.
Of course.
Right.
And I can introduce you to a person who wrote every day for 6...
Oh, gosh. All right, so now they're going to go into his mom's book, where she vacuums naked or something. I don't know. I didn't watch the whole deal with his mom.
All right.
But once again,
you don't need the whole advertisement about the book.
Yeah, no, let me wrap this up, though. So once again, it's personal responsibility. And the beauty of personal responsibility is there's nothing we can do as a society if it's the individual. If just individuals are that way, there's nothing we can do as a society, which is this non-interventionist bullshit.
Well,
right.
What it is it's an excuse not to have to review our own individual morals and the way they fold together as a culture and society. We don't have to take into account. Ironically, by blaming personal responsibility, we don't have to take personal responsibility for the way we contribute to what might be, a morally bankrupt or corrupt set of social guidelines
Yeah.
that maybe need correcting. We don't have to take any responsibility for that if we could just point the finger at individuals. Oh, that person's lazy, that person this, that person that,
Yeah, but that's the point. Is if it's just that it's just on the individual, then there's no solution. So why care? You nailed it. I mean, you're absolutely right, and that's the problem. And I'm going to tell you, God, I'm going to hold my nose and say, I agree with Jamie Dimon on this one. I hate to say it,
Did
because
anybody think that we would be saying that here?
I would hope not, but I agree.
I would not think that would be what we would be saying here either of us.
Well, I'm a businessman too, so there's just at some point I'm going to have something in common with Jamie Dimon, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the reality. But I agree
and
with.
we apparently found it.
Well, there are a lot of things I actually agree with Jamie Dimon on. There are a lot of things I fervently disagree with him on. Don't get me wrong, but I agree with him on this point because he's a businessman and he's thinking about this. And a businessman, you can't afford to sit there and go, well, there's no solution. It's just some people are weak, some people aren't, some people want to work, some people don't. Nothing I can do. If I'm a shareholder and you're the CEO and you come to me and say, well, our employees are just lazy, nothing I can do about it, I'm going to go, fuck, you're fired. We're getting a new CEO. Do something. Right? Make me money. Right? So that was my approach. So let me jump into this. So I want to talk about, we're going to do this because it's a little back and forth, boys and girls, but this is actually going to be kind of funny at the end. You're going to get the joke. It's a big circle. It's a long joke, right? It's the duck goes into a bar joke. So I want to talk a little bit about, okay, so right now with student loans, right? The Biden administration did the debt forgiveness. It was the Eighth Circuit, which is a very conservative court, mostly Trump appointed court. They put a postponement on student debt relief. Okay. Student debt relief is one part of what the Biden administration did. They're actually putting more money now into colleges. So colleges now have to cap what they can raise tuition by, which is great news. So they're going to make it more affordable for kids to go to school. And they're going to continue to slowly do that and get it back to a point where the government mostly funds it, right? So you're not having to take out as much in student loans, right? I'll give you a great example. My mother works in higher ed, and years ago, she worked for a college. I'm not going to say which one, but when she started there, she was the dean of admissions, and her budget was 70% of her budget was state funded, federally and state funded when she started. 7 years later, 16% of her budget was federally funded. And what did they do? They started having to tack on fees and raise tuition to cover the cost. That's where you got screwed as a student. Was the government cut all that money, right? They really should just be giving it to the colleges directly, and they're doing that. But the big highlight was the student loan relief, and this got postponed mainly because of a lawsuit. And if you go through the lawsuit from the Eighth Circuit, there's zero there's not even a word in there about why they're postponing it. They're basically just saying, well, it's a big thing, so we're going to kick it up to somebody else. There's no argument for why. They didn't even examine the argument. They're just saying it's too big for us. No, it's above our pay grade. It was kind of their thing. It's like, dude, you're the Eighth Circuit Court. It's above your pay grade to make a decision. I mean, come on. So the Supreme Court's going to hear this in March. I'm not super optimistic, considering the Supreme Court has no problem taking away rights from women with no argument at all. So yeah, I don't know how optimistic I am that the debt relief is going to go through, but we'll see. You never know. But right now, the debt relief has been postponed. Now, I'm going to bring in, there's Christina Ellis and Dave Ramsey taking their gloating lap. See, you're not going to get debt relief. The government sucks. This is their little gloat moment. You're going to love it, Lace. It's going to feel good. And
it already feels, you see the face I'm making?
Yeah.
This is how I already feel about it.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, I guess we can have sex tonight, honey. That was the face. Yeah, it's okay. Christina Ellis always looks like that.
I'm going to be washing my hair.
Yeah. Well, I'm just hurt that I wasn't invited to the big hair washing party. So, anyway, they're going to take a big lap, but here's what they're bitching about. So, what happened was the government had subsidized part of the management of the student loan stuff to a third party, to a private company, and this company screwed up and they sent out 9 million emails telling people they got relief, and some of them didn't even apply for relief. They didn't. So they're kind of gloating about that too. See, oh, what a big F up that is. And it is, don't get me wrong, but they're going to gloat about it. But I want to talk about this because this ties into what we were talking about earlier, education and work ethic.
Why were there even emails sent out in the first place saying they've been approved when this hasn't passed? This program hasn't passed. It's not in action. Why were 16 million people, quote unquote, approved?
Okay, so that was Christina Ellis. Real quick, I just got to pause for 1 sec. She is Dave Ramsey's college education expert, and she's asking, why were those emails sent out? Why was this sent out? Well, I just explained it to you. The third-party company screwed it up. It took me literally 1 minute to look that up. In fact, it really didn't take me that much. It popped up on my phone. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting article. But the college education expert for Dave Ramsey can't figure out why that happened.
Oh, you know what? Let's take this one step further. I'm pretty sure on that huge staff of theirs, they have people whose jobs it would be to do varying types of research on these items that they are discussing. So not even just her individually, sure, her too, but like, where are the people who are supposed to be looking this stuff up and checking out like the ins and outs of sort of the current event situation so that they know what they're talking about? I mean,
Right.
You and I have you and I and a search engine.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But I want to close. That's the problem when you're an autocratic transactional leader, as Jamie Dimon had put it earlier. Nobody's motivated. Just whatever. I don't care. I don't care if Christina sounds like an idiot. It's not like I'm getting paid anymore. Oh, man.
Are you paused on her doing something?
I know.
Okay.
She's doing the finger quote. She's a college expert, quote unquote.
When they haven't actually been approved. The program hasn't been approved.
Well, Biden had approved it, and he had issued the announcement, but none of the systems were in place to cause the approvals to actually happen. And knowing that there were legal challenges to his,
First off, there wasn't legal challenges when he approved it, and most of the legal challenges were shot down. This just happens to be a poor one that got through.
program, which may yet need a congressional approval. We don't know. We'll see.
Oh my God!
Lots of
That's
stuff
why
up in the air. But given all of that, this is just, it's a political play. They accidentally told 50% more people that they had approval than did. Accidentally.
Okay. So now he's going to make a conspiracy argument, which we can skip. But anyway, so that's the thing. So I want to talk about this. So they did, and we'll get into this in a second. They did a video called Borrowed Future, where basically their argument and her argument is you shouldn't go to college if you can't pay for it out of your own pocket, or you don't get scholarships, which would mean 80% of people shouldn't go to college, roughly, because most people have to borrow money. The problem isn't that you have to borrow money to go to college. The problem is that college is so expensive. But once again, if you don't make it about the system, you make it about the individual, then there's nothing for us to fix. right? We don't have to do anything. But essentially, at the end of the day, we're saying, hey, you shouldn't have to borrow money, or you shouldn't. They would even probably argue you shouldn't be able to borrow money to go to school. I would probably say they would probably agree with that. But the bottom line is if you do that, only rich people go to school. So now we're back to the fucking 1920s.
And Worthington's Law.
Worthington's Law. Money equals better than.
Full circle, right? Money equals better than.
All right. So, like I said, we're going to jump back and forth a little bit. It's kind of a complicated joke. You'll get the punchline at the end, but we're going to jump. And now we're going to jump back to Mike Rowe on Tucker Carlson. I told you he was making the rounds on Fox. Mike is making the rounds. He's doing his thing. And Mike is going to talk about some stuff on Fox. Oh my gosh. What's he going to talk about? Is he going to talk about how Americans are lazy again? Probably.
Well, not a lot of people are working right now in the United States, and that's a big change. That's why maybe you have to use the drive-thru because no one's inside the restaurant. But not only is
wait. If no one's inside the restaurant, then no one's at the drive-thru. Is that just me, or?
I think he meant customers.
Oh, okay. No, he said no one's working. So if no one's working at the restaurant, there's nobody at the drive-thru.
Oh, okay. You know what? I interpreted him as okay.
Yeah, it's hard to pay attention.
Maybe.
He just asks a lot of stupid questions. Why is it that nobody's working at restaurants? Why is it that my wife won't look at me?
Maybe we're changing. Our attitudes toward work are changing. And a lot of people seem to have contempt for work all of a sudden. Signs are everywhere. You probably noticed them. Mike Rowe has spent a life thinking about work. He's host of How America Works on Fox Business Network. He joins us on the set of Patriot Awards. Of course, the immortal host of Dirty Jobs. And I think our most frequent and popular guest. Anyway, thank you so much for coming back. Mike Rowe, obviously you have noticed the change in attitude toward work. Some people sort of mocking the idea of work. What's your response to that?
Yeah, so I'm wrong about as much as I am right.
Yep, me too.
Wait. No, you're wrong more than you're right. Just want to put a pin in this.
And it's for that reason I hate to say I told you so out loud ever.
Yep.
But for 15 years, my foundation has been talking about this slow sort of unraveling of what we loosely call work ethic, whatever that means.
Yes.
Right? And now between
he doesn't know what it means, and we're talking about it unraveling.
Yeah, it's unraveled. I don't know what it is. I just know it's unraveling. Right?
Oh my gosh. Okay, you're probably gonna have to cut this joke, but that'd be like you deciding you were gonna write this whole thing about the unraveling of spiritual America,
right?
When you don't even know what spirituality is.
I don't have a clue what spirituality means.
I personally would take your head, shove it in the toilet, and give you a swirly old school style if you did something that dumb. So you can't say you have no idea what something is, and then like dub yourself as like the expert of it.
Oh yeah, no, I'll admit it. When people talk about spirituality, I don't know what they're talking about. I've never gotten a definition that made any sense to me. There's just some things
you're also not going to claim that you know whether or not it's being successful or unraveling in all of America, are you?
No, I'm not going to write a book about Gandhi's spirituality or something.
If you don't know what it is,
right?
You don't get to be expert on it. Expertise, at bare minimum, required
right?
So that you can find what it is.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Even vaguely.
Right. I'm not going to write about shit I don't know. But that's the problem. But that's what they're doing. They're talking about stuff that we don't know what it is. We just know it's bad. Yeah. It's like,
and they know whether or not it's working, apparently.
Yeah. It's like when they come in there and the guy tells you, you have it, Lacey. You have it. And I don't even know what it is, but you have it.
You definitely have it. You're like, oh, do I want it? I don't know. You know what it is, so I'm not sure if I want it or if I don't want it.
I know, it's a little scary.
An economist who's really drilled down on it. And I mean, last week there was an article in the New York Times called something like "How to Combat the Assault on Modern Work," and I thought it was going to be an article about coal miners or crab fishermen or big tough jobs where the danger is real. It wasn't. It was an article about everything from paper cuts to the non-existent pet bereavement policies that are being deemed hard. I'm not making it up. And so we're in a place where 7 million able-bodied men are not only not working between the ages of 25 and
7 million?
7 million able-bodied men are not only not working, they're affirmatively not looking for a job. That's never happened in peacetime, ever. And economists like Nick Eberstadt take a dim view of it. They're worried, and they're trying to inject that into the conversation at a time when we're still looking at the unemployment number as the true harbinger of what's really going on. But it's not. In his view, it's a Depression-era artifact. We're just looking at the wrong thing. We're looking.
All right. So that's true. 7 million. It's about 7 million men are between 25 and like 40 are not looking for work. They just gave up. Now, he's talking about the analysis of that. They're not looking for work because they've gotten too many handouts or they just don't care. They're lazy. Go ahead.
Right, because they're just too darned lazy to bother looking for work. Not because there's an entire systematic problem that is basically sort of pushed them out, so to speak.
Right. So he talked about Nick Eberstadt, who's an economist. I've read Nick Eberstadt. He's college professors like to use him because he's easy to knock down. He works for the American Enterprise Institute, so he's right-wing. He's very conservative. The other fun thing about the American Enterprise Institute, who he works for, is they deny climate change. And one of their biggest donors is ExxonMobil. So, give you kind of a sense of their academic credentials, right? Nick Eberstadt also, the guy's published a ton of books through the American Enterprise Institute. You would be hard-pressed I can't find anything that he's done that's peer-reviewed. So nobody really takes him seriously, right? Anybody can publish a book. Publishing a peer-reviewed paper is different. Now, the 7 million guys, this is where I think this is interesting, and this is where the joke starts to get sexy. 7 million men aren't working. Now, this is actually a trend that's been going on for about 20 years. And this has been heavily studied, especially by the White House and the government, about why is this. And you know what it is? These 7 million people, right, is the number it's growing to now. Part of it's COVID, but they have two main things in common. They live generally in the South or in very conservative areas. So they have certain attitudes about work because of that. And they either have just graduated from high school and that's all they have, or they dropped out of high school. So these are non-educated men in a workforce where 75% of new jobs require some college. So they can't get decent paying jobs, and they just gave up. The other thing I want to talk about is this. The increase in jobs right now, the big sectors are going to be things like healthcare, service industry, finance to a degree was on the list. But healthcare, service industry are the big ones. Admin is a big one. These are jobs that have always been generally considered feminine jobs. And so these guys don't want to take feminine jobs because they're conservative guys. They want to take masculine jobs.
Well, then let's I'm going to stereotype here, but let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah, we have to at this point.
Those stereotypes about what is a feminine job does tend to be a fairly conservative viewpoint. So it is particularly this sort of section of people that are going to be the most resistant to it, because that's really where the stronghold of that belief is, you know?
Yeah, well, a lot of these guys thought they could go get a job out of college doing construction or working at a factory or something like that. And a lot of those jobs are gone. And some of that's from moving jobs overseas, but a lot of it's automation. Machines do most of the work anymore. They do most of the tasks. And these guys, the problem is they need to get educated, and they didn't bother getting educated. But we just saw Dave Ramsey, and then they were kind of talking about it. But it's like, yeah, they don't believe that education is. They think you should get educated. They like education, but they only think you should do it if you can afford it. Right? You shouldn't borrow money to do it.
But then they're literally. So by making that argument, they're literally advocating that these people get systematically shut out of jobs. Like that is literally what they are saying, which they probably don't realize they're saying. But they are literally saying, let's systematically keep these people shut out of positions. And then they're going to turn around and argue that it's their own doing, which I suppose in a certain way you could, because it is an individual choice not to go and get an education. But you see, they're the ones going and saying you should only go get the education if you can afford it. So which is it?
Right.
Is it a systematic problem that you're kind of trying to help perpetuate, or is it an individual choice problem?
Right.
It can't be both, right?
Right. Well, that's the thing. So,
but it seems like they're kind of on team. It's both at the same time and don't even realize it. Oh, brother.
So just for a fun bit, that's the joke. And if you're somebody like me who took a lot of history in college and political science, you've read Thomas More, you've read Utopia, right? If you haven't, I'm going to boil it down. So Thomas More was a big political science philosopher. When was he born? 1779 he was born, so early 1800s, 19th century, right? And he was Irish, and you had a lot of people out of Ireland and Scotland that were philosophers publishing these works. And I know a lot of the Enlightenment period gets attributed to the French, but a lot of it came out of Ireland and Scotland. And a lot of it was because the French were asking, well, why are all these great writers coming out of Ireland and Scotland, like More and I can't think of them all, but there's a ton of them. And the reason was because Ireland and Scotland started some of the first public schools in Europe. So these peasant kids that normally couldn't read and write were now getting educated. And oh my gosh, apparently a lot of the peasants are smart too.
Who would have thought?
Who would have freaking
there are
thunk
smart
it?
people all over the place.
We've said it several times. Talent is everywhere. You just got to develop it. It's all over the place.
Right. And unfortunately, sometimes people get systematically shut out of their ability to fully develop those talents.
Right. There's opportunity everywhere, but they screw. So Thomas More wrote so in his book Utopia, he wrote an interesting thing, and that's the whole joke today. And we kind of ripped off Thomas More in this joke. He wrote a thing about, so if you're a king or a leader and you create a system where the people are starving because you're overtaxing them or forcing them to pay too much, and then they turn to crime and thievery, and then you have to arrest them and execute them for crime and thievery, aren't you just creating a society of thieves and then having to punish them for what you made? You've created the problem, and now you're bitching about the problem. Right? I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I beat my kids and they never call me anymore. That's literally what they did. I want to do this last little bit too, because you nailed the point. But let's wrap it up with this, because this is the movie Borrowed Future. I'm going to give you that. So Borrowed Future is a documentary that Dave Ramsey did. And here you're going to see Mike Rowe, because he's Dave Ramsey's buddy. They hang, because they hate the poor people. And because they're lazy. We know they're lazy, Lace. They don't want to work. Anyway, so they're talking about why you shouldn't go to college unless you can pay for it out of your own pocket. And this cracks me the fuck up. And I actually did a whole breakdown of this movie, if you want to check it out. But this is just a clip from their movie. Oh, hang on. There we go.
Money you're going to be paying off for decades.
It never was the degree that caused people to succeed. It was the knowledge base, the tools in their belt to be able to get their work done. that's what caused people to succeed. It still is what causes people to succeed.
All right, so that's so contradictory. I want to clarify. The degree doesn't cause you to succeed. It's the knowledge base, the tools of your work belt. Well, the degree is something you get after you get the knowledge in the work base. It's proof that you have it.
Right, and in many career paths, the college education is the manner in which you acquire those tools that you stick in that belt, unless it's some sort of more apprenticeship style career path or whatever, but there's still an educational component even there.
But I mean, if you went to the hospital, right, and there's two gynecologists, and one has a PhD, and the other one is I had to make this bad.
Always back to that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you used to force that on me. So gynecologist. One has a PhD.
70 years ago.
I know. It's never going to end though.
No.
So you're two gynecologists. One has a PhD, and the other one is just like, well, I don't have any degrees or licenses, but I have the knowledge base and the tool set. Which one are you going to pick, Lace?
I am even more concerned about him having that tool set. And I run like the wind away from that office.
But you don't believe Dave? It doesn't matter. The degree doesn't matter. What matters is the knowledge.
Send Dave to that particular guy.
All right, Dave, you got two proctologists. One has a degree and the other doesn't. Which one do you let him? I have a lot of practice at it. I don't have any degrees. And why do you have a lot of practice at it?
We definitely want dentists like that too.
Yeah.
So who are you getting your tooth extraction from?
Yeah, I want you
guy with a set of pliers.
Yeah, I want you drilling into my freaking head. Yeah, I want you to drill in my head, but you don't have a degree.
Demonstrate that you have the skills to do the job is going to be a much higher indicator than where you went to school, or for that matter, even if you have the...
Okay. God, he's so stupid. I can't even... All right. Lacey, if you can just demonstrate you have the skills, you don't need a degree. Oh, wait. The degree is the demonstration that you have the fucking skills?
I mean, like, to a degree, I can't argue with if you can demonstrate you have the skills, that you can do the job, because that's true.
But the degree is the demonstration.
We're just literally ignoring the fact that for so many career paths, the degree program is the thing that gets you the skills.
Well, right. That's my point. It's like, for example, so I have a little tech company, right? And when we hire people, my business partner is a better judge of this because he's actually a computer engineer. I'm a finance major, right? But when we look at people, and I'm like, well, do you think the guy can do the job? You know what he tells me? Well, yeah, I'm looking at his education and his degree and the classes he took. I think he's skilled for it. But you know who vetted the guy for us? The college. I mean, we didn't have to go through all that process to train and vet the guy. The college did. That's why you pay to go to college. But I think it's so stupid. No, just show them you have the skills. Yeah, you're just going to walk in and we're going to sit there for 3 weeks watching to see if you can actually do the job.
It's definitely a good use of your time and resources.
Yeah, absolutely. But Dave has full budgets and backgrounds and probably nude photos of half his employees,
The degree. I think there's a real opportunity for guidance counselors and parents to talk to their kids about how they want to work as opposed to what they want to do. I think a smarter thing to tell a person who's trying to figure out what to be when they grow up is to say, put it all on the table. And if you do that, you're liable to be a very happy, satisfied plumber making 6 figures a year, or perhaps running your own mechanical contracting company.
Okay. Oh, man. Oh, Mike. Mike. So if you watch my cut of this video, I actually address this. The first thing he said, I don't know, put it all on the table. I couldn't quite figure out what he was saying, right? That talked about how they want to work versus how you want to work versus what you want to do. I don't really understand that. Maybe you guys can explain it to me in the comments. That would be great. I don't really understand. But
I didn't connect the dots totally either. I just thought that I did see some part of it that made it connect for me.
But he's kind of making the insinuation, the point, and he's insinuating, you don't necessarily need to go to college. You could just be a plumber, make 6 figures. And I was like, ooh, that's not a bad gig. I looked it up. And I actually broke it down in my video with more clear numbers than this. I can't remember the exact number. But there was only one job where a plumber could make close to 6 figures. It was like 98-something thousand. But it required a bachelor's degree. So this idea that you don't need to go to college, just be a plumber and make 6 figures is bullshit. And the next 2 or 3 jobs on the high-paying jobs on that list, I think I just went to Indeed and looked at the top-paying plumbing jobs. The next 2 or 3 jobs on that list required bachelor's degrees, some college, associates. So they all required higher ed. And the ones that didn't required 6 to 7 years of apprenticeship, which means you got to get lucky and get hooked up with somebody who will let you apprentice with them for 7 years before you can even. And those I think topped out at 65 or 68, something like that. That's the most you're going to make. So this idea that don't spend the money and go to college. It's not about what you want to do in your life. It's about how you want to work. Right? It's about the return on the investment of your education. You go to school because you want to make money. You don't go to school because you want to be educated and more fulfilled as a human being. That's not what education's about, Lacey. By the way, I know you don't understand that. You're a teacher. You like to think that education's about making people better and teaching them how to think and be more free.
I kind of really do.
Yeah, it's not. It's really, kids. The reason you go to work is because when I hire you, I want you to be really good for me, and your job should be to be the best worker for me and make me money. That's your job. That's why you get an education, so you can work for me and make me a better person. That's your goal in life. Me. It's all about me. It's all about me and Mike Rowe. Me and Mike Rowe and Dave Ramsey. We're going to go out and get whiskey later and talk about how it's all about us. Because that's the whole fucking argument. It's so stupid. And if you fall for it, I'm sorry, kids. No. You don't go to college to make a ton of money. That's not the point. That's not the point of... I don't read a book because I think I'm going to make money from it. I mean, if that's your goal in life, then go with God. I don't know what to tell you on that one, man. Good luck. I read a book because I want to learn. Because I want to think about things in a new way. Because I want to develop, right? That's why I went to college.
You want to develop your mind.
Right. When that was
sometimes that translates into money, and sometimes it translates into other things.
Right. And that's that was the one thing I loved about college is the professors. These people are really smart. They think about this stuff all the time. They study it all the time, and they challenge you. And you have to rethink your position a lot. And you're wrong a lot. But no. It's easier when you just believe that, nope, some people are just lazy, and so we don't have to do anything. And that's their whole spiel on life. So we'll clip it. So yeah, sorry, we had a little technical problem there, a little blip. And anyway, yeah, it was a technical problem.
Technical problems come with 4 legs and tails.
Yeah, Lacey got attacked by a lion.
It's true. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was kind of our point. Yeah, let's wrap it up. Lacey, good work today. Where can everybody catch you?
So for information on coaching programs, courses, workshops, or blogs, you can find me at mysensewithsense.com. If you're interested in writing into us, either about those programs, about the show, or to give us some fun clips you'd like to see us talk about, or topic suggestions, questions, where are they going to do that?
They can do it at gossipfinance80 at outlook.com. I'm also taking a couple clients right now, so if you guys, somebody's interested and they want to talk, I'm available at the moment. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Once again, good work today, and we will catch you guys later. Oh, this week I'll do a video on bonds, and then I'll do a video later on setting up LLCs versus S corporations. So I'll get that done. All right, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.